addressing the question, like, what even is a Lightroom? So basically a Lightroom is something you can create in any rendering program, and its goal is really just to simulate like photo shoot lighting. And what I mean by photo shoot is kind of like here, you know, with models and everything, we have the big bright white light and just kind of eliminates the environment just to make you look like you're in just nice even white light. And it's just super duper basic. It's going to give you a really nice final product that's super universal. So here's just some renders that I did for today's video, which you'll see later. This is just basically the type of stuff that you can make using a Lightroom. So it's not really good for scenery, but it is really important for fashion stuff like this. And with editing, it just looks so good. So before we get into the video, I do want to mention that I do have a slideshow linked in the description box down below, and I made this a while ago, but I thought I'd link it there because it basically goes over all of Blender's different lighting features, or at least the ones that you should be somewhat familiar with. So it's a really good resource if you forget how to do something. Now that that's out of the way, we can just jump right into Blender. Okay, so like I said earlier, this is a very like beginner friendly tutorial, so if you know nothing about lighting, you're still gonna do perfectly fine, do not worry. The only like prerequisites, I guess, is just be familiar with how to deal with a rig, or at least kind of know your way around Blender, but you do not need to be an expert. So once we have Blender loaded in, I have my rig here. You can use any rig you want, so anyone is fine. Go ahead and upload that skin texture that you just made, or you could just be using a character. Again, it really doesn't matter. So let me go ahead and do that. Okay, so once we have our character all good, the easiest way to build a Lightroom is not to pose it first, just kind of leave it plain and standing completely still. The first thing we're going to be working with is something called an area lamp, and this is one of the most like basic ways to add light into Blender. So all you need to do is go to the add, which is right here, click on that, and then go to light right up here and then choose area. And that's going to spawn this kind of square, basically like right here. All of the lights in Blender can be manipulated with all of the move, rotate, and scale tools in your top left corner. So I'm just going to move mine out of the way so we can see what it looks like. It's kind of like a square with a little line kind of pointing from it, and when you have it selected, it's going to be orange. So this is basically something that emits light. It's almost like a little flashlight device. The square is where the light is coming from, that's the size of the lamp, and then the line is the direction that the light is going. What we're going to do is we're going to start by making this a little bit larger with the scale tool. You can also press S on your keyboard as a shortcut. So Lightrooms, at least for me, I typically use about 3, and I'll show you how I position them in a second. So I make them about, you know, like the width of the character, maybe a little bit bigger, and then maybe about half of its height. So this kind of rectangular shape is going to be really, really good. Next, we need to position it over the character, and you can just use the move and rotate tools for this. So the first thing I'm going to do is rotate it at about a 45-degree angle. One thing you do not want to do is put it completely straight at like a 90-degree angle, because that just will not look good. It'll kind of wash out your render. So make sure you're working with angles at about 45 degrees. And again, remember the line is where the light is going. And then I'm just going to place this one kind of right above our character. Make sure it's like a somewhat decent space away. We don't want it to be right in front of the face, obviously, but we don't want it too far away either, so this will probably be about good. And make sure your line is kind of tilted at the character. So there's one area lamp. Again, this is going to emit light, and I'll show you that in a second, but one is not going to be enough, and it's not going to be what we want. So we're going to make 2 more. The easiest way to do this is just use Shift D on your keyboard, and this is going to duplicate it. And then you can kind of move your duplicate over here. So now we have 2. This one I like to have 2 in the front, so this one I'm just going to rotate kind of like pointing from the other direction. A 45-degree angle in the other direction, and then move that down a little bit, like this. just kind of adjust it. And it's going to look like this. So we have two kind of panels that make up your area lamps. Now once we have two in the front, I'm going to put one in the back. So again, let's just Shift D to make a duplicate, and then we can just rotate this around so it's facing the other way and put it in the back. This one I'm going to make a little bit larger, so you can just use the scale tool or you can press S on your keyboard, which is what I'm going to do, to make it a little bit bigger. Maybe a little bit skinnier too. Kind of like that. Just adjust it in the back, and then I'm going to move it a little bit closer. So once we have this pretty basic general setup, we have three simple area lamps. They look really good, really simple. They kind of create like a little house over your rig. Obviously, when you go to render this in the render view over here, it's still very, very dim. Like, that is not good lighting. But that's because the area lamps right now, they're not very strong. Like, the default is just very, very dim, and then we can adjust that later on. So to adjust the strength of your area lamps, make sure one of them is selected, and then go to this light tab right here in the side panel. It has a little green kind of light bulb icon. Right here we can see the color of the lamp. We have it at white right now. You can make it any color you want, but for general light rooms you want to keep this nice and white to get the most even kind of basic lighting. And then you have the power over here. Right now the power is only at 10, and that's why it's super duper dim. So for starters, I'm just going to give it maybe 500 or so. You can type that in with your keyboard or use the arrows here. And then when we put this in rendered view, we can see it's much brighter now. Now we have light shining on the character because we increased the power. I'm just going to go around and play around with these two, the two in the front, until there's a nice even lighting on the front of the character, and then we'll mess with the back later. So for the bottom one, I'm going to make it slightly dimmer, maybe like 350 for now. We don't want this to be too bright or it's going to make the character overexposed, meaning it's just going to look like the character is glowing basically. We'll kind of lose the detail, so make sure it's not too bright, but also not too dim. Once I think that looks pretty decent, I'm going to add a light to the back. This one, it doesn't need to be too bright, just as long as it kind of is no longer super duper dark back there, it's gonna be pretty good. So I'm just gonna put that at maybe like 400. Just so there's a little bit of light back there. Maybe even a little bit lower. The difference between a Lightroom, at least for Roblox, and just standard like 3-point lighting is that the backlight is not brighter than the front lights. You want to make sure the front lights are kind of the brightest, and then the backlight is just there to supplement that rather than it being the brightest light. Once we have the standard character looking like this, the last thing that I like to do for Lightrooms is add a little bit of detailing. I like to highlight the face. So one way you can do this is by adding a different kind of lamp. So go back to your add, and then back to light. This time we're going to select a point lamp, and it'll spawn in right there. So the difference between point lamps and area lamps is point lamps are circular, and they kind of emit light all in a circular shape, whereas, or more of a sphere shape, I guess, and then your area lamps are just more like rectangles and kind of like panels that create light. I'm gonna go ahead and move this up by the face since that's the area that I want to highlight. Kind of right in the middle. Make sure it's not really touching, but it'll be pretty close. And then make sure you're still in that Object Properties tab. And then again, same thing, you can adjust the power and the color. So I'm not going to make the power too strong because as you can see right now it is super duper bright even at 10. So I'm going to move that down to maybe like a 6 or 7. And you can play around until you think it looks the best. This is just going to highlight the face. The scale of the point lamp is kind of just the size of this orange circle here because it's in that sphere shape. You're going to go back to this side panel where it says radius, and then you can just adjust this decimal to be a little bit bigger. So if I make it 0.5, as you can see, the orange circle got much bigger. That's probably a little too big. So I put it at like 0.35, and that looks pretty good, just to kind of highlight the face a little bit, make sure it's not touching. And then when we turn it back to rendered view, we can see we have this nice even lighting all over the character. That's kind of the setup. From the side we have 3 area lamps and 1 point lamp. You can go ahead and adjust the power numbers for all of these until it looks how you want. This definitely needs a little bit more fixing because I think it's kind of bright in the front. So I'm just going to go ahead and fix that, and then we'll have basically our entire Lightroom all complete. So it takes literally 5 minutes and it'll look really good. So I went ahead and adjusted them. Right now my back area lamp here is at 350. The top area lamp in the front is at 500 and the bottom one is at 300. Last step, of course, is to add a camera if you haven't already. Go ahead into camera viewpoint. And remember, the shortcut to kind of use WASD in Blender is just shift and the tilde icon. So I'm going to go ahead and position this kind of in the middle so we can see what our character looks like. And this is our completed Lightroom. It was super duper easy. That's it. It's just a couple area lamps and a point lamp, which is completely optional. You can play around, you can adjust it to however you want, and then you can reuse these for basically any character. But now I'm just going to go ahead and do a quick kind of like speed demonstration of actually doing this with a real person, with a real character, and show you what the final render looks like. Okay, so this is the character all complete and rendered with that simple little Lightroom we just pulled together in literally less than 5 minutes. I did have to adjust the lights a little bit, but of course you can do that whenever you want. It really just depends on what the character looks like and what it's wearing. I had to make mine slightly dimmer since I have a different skin tone here and a white shirt. I just had to make them dimmer to compensate for all of the bright colors that my character is wearing. But that's literally it. That's how you make a Lightroom, quote unquote Lightroom, in Blender for your Roblox characters. It looks very good, very simple, super easy, almost like it was made in Cinema 4D because that lighting looks so good and so pretty. And that's literally it.